Each year, the sea level rises,
setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control.
10 hottest years ever measured.
Climate change is our single greatest security threat.
You are failing us.
Governments know it. Even the United States military knows it. None of this is rhetoric, and none of it is hysteria. It is fact.
House on fire.
Today, we're talking to a woman with a fascinating project. She will be traveling and biking 3,000 miles from Miami to Montreal to help create an army of climate educators and warriors.
Let's start with you telling us about your name and background.
My name is Heather Noreen. I'm a mother of 5 children. I work as a consultant in carbon footprint strategy, reducing carbon footprint with companies. I've also created a couple nonprofit associations, not-profit organizations. I'm 48 years old. I actually live in Europe right now.
Oh, really?
I'm born and raised in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And I moved to Europe as a Rotary student on an exchange program in my last year in high school. And I stayed there. And I've lived there most of my life.
So you're here for a very specific reason, and that's because you're starting a climate tour. Can you tell me a little bit more about this special, incredible climate tour? What is it, and how did it come about in the first place?
What is a climate tour? I'll start with that. It's first of all, it's a new nonprofit organization that I set up in France. A climate tour is basically how to raise awareness while traveling. So maybe in areas where using different tools that exist, workshops, games, because learning is always more fun with games. Secondly, in a climate tour, we actually stay with local people. The idea is that we get to know people, we exchange. I think that's very important in collectively rewriting our story. And thirdly, we have to travel in a low carbon way. So that could be biking, like I'm doing. That could be hiking. It could be, I think we don't do it much here in the USA, but in Europe we still hitchhike. It could be, because it's like carpooling, could be taking the train. Anything that's sharing public transportation or even the bus, why not? And what is it about? It's basically about getting out there, connecting people. I think we've lost that in our society. Is we're always on social network, we're liking this, we're liking that, and we're just really passing by the fact that what we love most as humans is interacting. Yes, so if we're not out there moving around, we're not interacting really. It's interaction, but it doesn't work the same way in our brain.
Definitely. So would you say that that's the reasoning as behind you starting this nonprofit, or was there something else that got you into wanting to start the climate tour specifically?
Really, it's the moment I became a trainer of facilitators. Okay. So I've been facilitating these workshops for almost 3 years when I quit my job and decided I really wanted to work in the ecological transition or transformation, I kind of like to call it now. Some of these tools existed, and so I trained myself and I started doing them with people, just normal people, with businesses, with people that work in cities. And after about 1,000 participants, I became a trainer of facilitators. And it's at that point I thought, wow, I can actually train people now. So if I can train people, that means if I go somewhere, I'll actually be able to train people while I'm traveling, and they'll be able to do what I do. And that has a big snowball effect.
Oh, that's awesome. You have said that part of your goal is to help people understand planetary boundaries. What do you mean by that?
I think actually not many people know about planetary boundaries. I learned about them through a book called Donut Economics.
Donut Economics?
Yeah, okay, exactly. Written by Kate Raworth, a British woman that actually worked quite a bit in the United States. These boundaries are what makes the Earth a place that we can live in. And if we go past these boundaries, what's great about a boundary is that if we don't go past the point of no return, we can actually come back to something that makes the planet a place where humans can live. So we've seen that already in the past. So these 9 planetary boundaries are just very important to our life, to humanity. Right now, we've gone over 6 of them. Oh. And in the past, we actually went over one and we came back. I don't know if you remember. Well, you wouldn't remember because you're very young, but other people in this room might. In about the 90s, we talked about ozone. And we had holes in the ozone layer. And it was a big problem because the ozone is what protects us from the UV rays. And so it was really important at that time that we did something because this was really dangerous for humans and for most biodiversity. So things happened. There were laws, things happened. And today we can see those holes closing up and we're back into a safe zone.
Okay.
The problem is that's only one of the planetary boundaries.
And you said now we've crossed 6?
6.
Could you list, if you know them off the top of your head, what are the 9 planetary boundaries? And then what are and while you're at it, the 6 that we've crossed so far?
Okay, probably the worst is, I think most people know about it. We hear about it. We don't understand the extent to which it's happening. But the worst would be the biosphere. It would be really biodiversity erosion. We've heard it, but it is happening. We're at the 6th major or mass extinction on Earth. So that would be number 1, really big on the list. So right after the biosphere, the mass extinction, we're talking about the levels of nitrous and phosphorus in our soil. Another big planetary boundary that we've crossed over extremely far. After that, where it's followed by, we could talk about land use, deforestation, the fact that we're building on a lot of soil. So then you have climate change. So it's only one of the planetary boundaries.
Okay.
After that, I would say probably water. Green, blue water are 2 boundaries that have been crossed over quite a bit. And also one that's been way crossed over is the introduction of new types of molecules on planet. So everything we create, plastic, any chemicals that actually didn't exist before a man created them, have really come in to pollute the planet and everything, our food. So I think, what am I missing? I think I've got all 6, right?
Yeah, those are the ones you said that we've crossed over, which is interesting because I wouldn't have considered maybe some of them to be apart from like having its own type of category or boundary really, but it makes sense that we have a boundary for air, for earth, the water, and then the climate in general would be its own. So that makes sense. So you said earlier the origins of your climate tour story started in Europe. You were in France. And it involves Spain, France, Amsterdam, and you even sold your car. Tell us a little bit more about the origins of this climate tour story.
Well, actually, I've lived in a lot of different countries. So I moved to France, and I moved to Belgium, and I moved to Spain, and then I even came back to the USA for a year with all my kids, so they could live kind of the American life and actually understand, where I came from. And even though they did come back a lot on the in the summer, obviously, but it was kind of vacation time, so it wasn't the same. So we came back we lived here for a year 9 years ago. And then on the way back, we moved back to France. And that was the big point of change. I think when I lived in Spain, I had a big pickup truck. Not a really pickup truck, but a big Jeep. And I had a different lifestyle. I always, I always recycled. I had the compost. I had chickens. I kind of considered myself, a green person. And when I moved to France, I just happened to move into this neighborhood that was in transition. It was like people were different. They were doing different things. And since I was moving, I no longer had different repairs. It was like things had changed, so I could change. And little by little, I started doing things differently. We sold a second car. The second car, we still have one because with 5 kids, not having cars is sometimes difficult. But we sold that car and we started just eating locally, going to the market, just doing a lot of different things.
Different lifestyle.
And then at some point, we're biking everywhere. Everyone loves biking. Let's go to Amsterdam by bike. So I live in Lille, which is north of Paris. It's about 200 miles away. And so okay, let's go. So one summer, we all got on our bikes and off we went to Amsterdam. It took us a week to bike there. And literally, I've traveled around the world. The kids traveled quite a bit. That was our number 1 vacation. I mean, We had such a good time. And they had like these maps with dots, and we didn't even have to use our phones. We'd like navigate with these maps and these numbers on signs and stuff. It was so much fun. And all we had to do all day long was pedal and chat. And I don't think we've ever talked so much in our lives. We just sat, we were out paddling. We'd stop here, we'd see this, we'd sit. And we got to Amsterdam, and the kids were like, this is incredible. And in Amsterdam, we had the bike. So we biked all around Amsterdam. And that moment was, I think that was a moment I came back and I was like, I have to change. We have to change. I left my job a year later, and ever since it's been a big adventure.
That sounds so like such a beautiful start to an incredible story. Can you give us some stories from the road? Anything that was really good? Anything that maybe was a little scary? What do you have?
Oh my gosh, stories from the road. Honestly, I think we always remember the good things. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to jinx myself here, but I've actually never had a flat tire. In all my trips, I think I've maybe done 5,000 miles, or 5,000 miles on different trips over the last 5 years. I've never had a flat tire. I think I've been really lucky. But I have met so many people. And I think that's really, who cares about all the rest? I have met so many people that every time I meet someone, they have the story. And what I like the most about being on your bike or hiking is that when you come across people, all of a sudden, you connect. You talk about things. It might just be to stop and drink some water and share some story and so on. But it's that connection that you have that you'll never have when you're whizzing by in a car. Mm-hmm. And it's taking that time. It's all the time we chat with people, and even connections we made with people that were just happening to go the same way as we were. Or we stop in a city and all of a sudden, oh, didn't we see you earlier? Yeah. And then we sit down and have dinner. I think that is the most incredible thing about low carbon travel, even on a train, is that we're actually not on a plane looking at a movie, changing.
But you're connected with people.
We're connected with people that are around us. And that's the new awesome. Narrative that's the new transformation of our society, is that we have to reconnect with people. We have to bring them with us. And as I said, if we can reach that 25% of the population, we got it.
Awesome. And then could you say maybe what has been your most favorite place to bike through so far? And all the, like you said, 5,000 miles that you've biked.
Holland.
Holland?
It's incredible.
Really?
Yeah, Holland.
Awesome.
It's just, they have this humongous society of people that's called Friends After Bikes. So you go, and of course now we have warm showers and couch surfing and things like that. But I think it was like one of the first nonprofits before warm showers and couch surfing that existed. There was over 50,000 families that actually have bikers come to their homes, and you can stay one night. They give you a great breakfast in the morning. You have a drink with them at night, and you share stories, and it's absolutely incredible. Incredible. And that's what really revived it. Even with my 5 kids, we biked through Amsterdam and we stayed in people's homes. And the kids were always like, wow, look at that woman. She hitchhiked through Africa all by herself. She had this map. And every time we met new people. And I think, I don't have any, I'd like to give you some grit about biking. Obviously, there's moments where there's a big hill and you're like, oh my God, I'll never make it up. But you can just get off your bike and walk it. There's nothing that I can say that what I keep of biking is just meeting people.
That's awesome. And that's honestly so beautiful. And you mentioned earlier also something about being a Climate Fresk trainer or a facilitator, and that's kind of what also helped you start the Climate Tour organization. So could you talk about what exactly is a Climate Fresk trainer or facilitator, since some listeners might be hearing that for the first time?
Yeah. Actually, the Climate Fresk in itself is like a tool. It's like a workshop. Mm-hmm. We even use it sometimes as a team building event, which is great because when you think about talking about climate, we often think about, debates, disgusting arguments and things like that. But no, this is really, we take a scientific observation of what's going on, and it's played out in a game-like manner. So there's about 42 cards that come in 5 sets, and people work on this. It's kind of like a puzzle. They work on it for about an hour and a half. So they read the cards, they interact, they discuss, okay, why is this linked? So it's all based on cause and effect, cause and consequence. And so they set this up and they create links, they draw arrows, they really discover something that's extremely scientific that most people would think, ooh, I'd never learn about this, or I'd never be able to learn about this. But actually, through this game of 42 cards, you learn so much, and you start to connect the dots. Because we see, people that, try to find, they think, I'm green like I did when I was in Spain. I'm a bit green. I know this, I know that. I know about the polar bears. But actually, we really know nothing. It's true. We see things and we think, but we're not able to connect the dots. We hear about this, we hear about that, but what about electrical cars? What about organic food? But we really don't know how all that links up. And this activity really leaves everything so clear and so visual. Mm-hmm. In a world where we're very digital, meaning we're always on screens, we're always typing, we're always, clicking and tapping. But here we're actually not connected. We have these cards, we're moving them around, we're talking, we're interacting with each other, and all of a sudden things just connect. It's actually quite magical. They connect, and then you realize, and that's the bad part about it, is that at some point at the end of the 5 sets of cards, people are like, this is depressing. Oh my gosh.
Everything is fun and games up until you realize that it's actually real life, that you're actually trying to emulate some of the downsides of climate change and the climate crisis.
Exactly. Well, actually, I don't want to spoil the climate fest, because there is an ending that I think really helps us to understand how our message is wrong. How do this for the planet, do that for the planet, recycle, walk more, take your bike more, do it for the planet. That's the wrong message.
Really?
And the climate fest helps you to understand why we do those things. And it's definitely not for the planet.
That's honestly really cool. And I guess it just goes to show that people need bite-sized, consumable information that's easy to digest, but also important to know. So I think that just goes to show like the how accessible this climate fresque or these fresques are. So considering that you were just someone who happened to come across a fresque, and from then on you've made it your work currently, what is your response to people who say there's nothing I can do about the climate crisis? I feel like there's a lot of ideas nowadays of like people feeling very down. Oh, what is one person going to do? What would be your response?
My response is often take a look at history.
I think that's a very valid point.
Slavery? Mm-hmm. What about women's rights? What about smoke? I'll go to simpler things. What about smoking in public areas? What about seatbelts in cars? Actually, all those things, at some point, people thought, what can I do about it? And little by little, people started doing things. And when people started to do things, things happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tell them. It's all about stop asking questions and start doing. Yeah.
All right. So tell me about this climate tour. What is it and how did it come about?
So basically, what is it? I'm going to be biking from Miami to Montreal. I'll even be catching the train from Portland back to Stamford, Connecticut, to bike up a different bike route, which is the bike route number 7, U.S. bike route number 7. And going from Miami to Portland, we'll actually be taking the East Coast Greenway. So I think a lot of people don't know about these things, but actually there's a lot of bike routes in the USA, and they're growing, and there's more and more people are becoming members of these different communities and biking. So that's something I really, with my son who's coming with, he's a photographer. So he'll be doing a lot of shoots. We want to make it seem interesting for people to actually get out on their bikes or even hike on these paths, which are just absolutely incredible. Sometimes we don't realize that we're always busy zooming around in our cars. But actually, when you get on a bike or you start hiking, you start seeing amazing things just so close to home.
Definitely. And so you said that you're from France. You live in France actively, in Europe. I mean, why are you doing this tour in the United States and not in Europe?
I'm actually American. I mean, I'm born and raised in Kenosha, Wisconsin. My grandparents were farmers. I spent a lot of time living in the USA when I was young. I guess it was really important for me to come back Also because I saw that the climate fresque was kind of taking off in the USA. There were, at the time, 10,000 participants. Now we're at 20,000. And I thought, well, maybe this could be just the tour. I mean, they're mainly on the West Coast. So I thought, okay, this could be nice. Going on the East Coast, there's a bike route. I don't really know many people. I don't have much family here, so it's really just to do the East Coast. But it was a great start. And it's actually incredible what's happening because all of a sudden there were state coordinators named for the climate fresque, and they've taken this moment and they're actually organizing all these steps, all these little stops I'm doing. And it's kind of propulsing, like giving them kind of a dynamic to say, okay, let's get this going. Let's get moving. Let's start training people. And so all of that kind of cooked up into one thing. I like to bike, and my son wanted to get off and do some photography in the USA. I love facilitating all of these tools. So it just kind of all came together.
Awesome. And could you describe some of the differences then in the attitudes towards climate change between Europe and the United States?
To tell you the truth, I think that we're all human, and we all have a similar way of feeling what's going on. Maybe in France they're a little bit more advanced, because we started these tools, and in France 1,200,000 people have actually participated in a climate fresque. Wow. So that's a lot. It's a small country, but it's still quite a bit amount. It's quite a lot of participants. But the most important thing is that we have to realize that we're all humans, and we all tend to have, I call it kind of this way of learning about new things and what happens to us, our emotions behind it. I think emotions are very important. I don't know if you know, it's a Latin word, and emotions means movement. Oh. So it's important to talk about emotions, and because we all start out with not believing something or kind of a small denial. Once you learn about something, but even when you lose someone close to you, you lose someone close to you, first of all, it's like, no, that's not possible. They're not gone. Then it's kind of depressing. You finally realize that's the way it is. And then you get a little depressed and you go down. And then little by little, you adapt and you start working things out. Well, I find that this whole new collective narrative that we have to rewrite, it's kind of like that. And in a way, I learned, every time I learned something new, I had that moment was like, oh, that can't be possible. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh no, not again, something else. And little by little, I started accepting things in a better way. I always say it's like, I started going in the Alps, or in the Rocky Mountains. And then all of a sudden became something more manageable, because little by little, I find that I adapted and I did things differently. And in the end, I was actually a happier person. Okay. So I think we really have to take people as people, no matter what country we live in, where we are. We all go through those same moments in life where when we find something out, it's just not possible. We deny it in a way. And some people will go faster. Some people will go slower. Some people will remain in denial longer than others. Some people will go fast. And that, I think, is very important when you facilitate.
Awesome. And so with all of that, and I think that's a wonderful attitude to have, especially with the differences in how Europe and the U.S. view climate change. Right now in Florida, we're having a rough time with, being able to discuss the different intricacies of the climate crisis, why it's such an issue. We can't really talk about it in schools. There's legislation being passed to really try to minimize all of the whole discussion around it, which is hurting a lot of us in Florida. So with all of this doom and gloom, and on the cusp of you starting your climate tour, doing something so awesome, can you leave us on a note of inspiration? How can we feel hopeful about the climate crisis despite everything going on around us?
You know what makes me wake up every morning, with a smile, is what I discovered recently, which was the social tipping point. We talked about it earlier. It's when people start changing, people start doing things. So right now, the most important thing is to start doing things, no matter how big or small they are, just to do it. And you can see studies show that there are certain types of population. Well, people are in certain categories. You have the inventors, people that just do stuff because they do it. Then you have the people that are early influenced by those people, like the early adopters. And then you have the section of population that they're not against it. Well, maybe I'll do that at some point. I'm a little bit curious about, about what's going on. Then you have people that are just like, I'll see maybe someday, but I'm not going to think about that now. I've got other stuff to do. And then you have the people that say, I'll never do that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at those different populations, which is just, that's the same anywhere in the world.
Correct.
You realize that really what we have to do today is just influence the beginning of those curious people. Meaning we have to take about 20-25% of the population and get them moving. And if we can do that,
then you can start change.
Exactly. We will collectively rewrite or collectively change the story we're living today.
So is there anything else you would like to add for our listeners and our viewers that are tuning into this episode?
Find that one thing that will get you on the track. For me, it was that trip to Amsterdam. Actually, decide to make a change in your life and go through with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that can just totally transform your life. I think sometimes we're in our day-to-day, and we're just not thinking that actually a little change can just totally transform our lives.
That's awesome. And I think that's so important. You have to start somewhere. Just start with making that first step to change.
Exactly.
And everything else will follow. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for being on House on Fire. It was a pleasure to have you, and good luck on your climate tour to Montreal.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
And there we have it. Another fantastic episode of House on Fire. To all our listeners on the East Coast, keep an eye out for Heather Noreen as she will be biking to a city near you soon. The House on Fire podcast is powered by the Clio Institute and could not be made possible without the support of the Lynn and Louis Wolfson II Family Foundation. Today's episode is hosted by me, Dania Toledo, and is produced by Michael Landsberg and Ryan Nerds of Unicorn Fire Studio. The music is composed by the Microscopic Orchestra. If you're digging what we do here at House on Fire, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite listening platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to leave us a like, comment, maybe subscribe, and hit the post notification bell so that you get a notification anytime we drop a new episode. Okay, until next time, listeners, take care of yourselves and remember to take care of our home, Earth.